We are left with two topics, that is about the partitioning, and I think we already talked about the performance tuning, how it can be tuned and everything. And next one is about the partitioning option. Let's say how does it works on the partitioning part. See, basically the partitioning is nothing but a parallel processing. So parallel processing means for executing, let's say for processing the data, we'll create a session, and that session will create by default one partition, and that partition is nothing but a thread, which it is called. So you know that whenever we execute a session, it creates a DTM buffer cache, and this DTM will create the three threads. One is called as a reader thread, and another is called as a transformation thread, and the next one is called as a writer thread, which it is corresponds to that. So for each and every time you execute a session, so one reader thread, one transformation thread, and one writer thread will be created. So that means each session will have only one partition. Minimum of one partition should be there, and it will have one reader thread, one transformation thread, and one writer thread, which it will be there, and then process the data. Suppose, let's say I have some 100 million records. For processing 100 million records, it is taking, let's say, 3 hours of time to process the 100 million records from the source to the target. So basically, if you give all these 100 million records to this partition, this only one reader thread has to read the data from database, and one transformation thread has to transform it completely, and one writer thread. Basically, what we do is, when you say that partitioning will increase the number of processes to uh, load this data or complete this data. So you can increase the number. So what you can do is, I can create a multiple partitions at the session level, something like a P2 and P3, and which will also create a separate threads like this reader thread, writer thread, and the transformation thread what you have. So basically, you're making sure that instead of processing the all data with a single partition, we are trying to execute that using the three different partitions what you have. So basically, when you actually create a multiple parallel process, all these processes will execute parallelly, not sequentially. It will execute parallelly in a way that will create a multiple partitions at the session level to distribute the data uniformly. So what I'll do now with this partition, so I'll process 33.33 million records, and with this I'll process the 33.33, and with this like 33.33. So basically you'll end up in, I'm actually I'm dividing the data among the three different partitions, so that I can reduce the load time what it is actually taking. So by default, one session will have one partition. In case whenever you want to tune the performance of your data loading process, you need to increase the number of partitions and distribute the data among the processes, among the parallel process, so that it will reduce the amount of time. Now, when you see that 100 million records is distributed, obviously since 33.33 million records are being processed by each partition, and you'll get the, out of this 100 million records, you'll basically have it'll take, if it is taking 3 hours for 100 million records, obviously when you create the three partitions, 3 by 3, obviously it will take only 1 hour to complete that. So in a simple words, partitioning is nothing but enabling the parallel processing in your session. That's it. So by creating the multiple partitions, you're creating the multiple reader threads, multiple transformation threads, and multiple writer threads, which effectively increasing your data loading process. So that is the use about the partitioning. So as I said yesterday, Informatica advanced edition only, you'll see the partitioning option and the high availability, pushdown optimization, all these options. And Informatica standard edition, the basic edition which we are using, you're not going to identify. So basically, first you need to understand, you need to understand where do I see the partitioning option in the workflow manager level. Pushdown optimization, partitioning, all these options you can enable only in the workflow manager. Practically, you may not be seeing it because I'm logging into the different repository to show you. So basically, let's say this is my administrator credentials. I'm just logging into the usual repository where we actually go. Okay, this is our working folder. So right click on it, click on open, and then this, and if you go to the workflow designer, edit the session. So generally the partitioning option will be enabled here. So you have a transformation tab. Next to that, you'll have a partition tab. If it is your Informatica Power Center is an advanced edition. Since this is a basic edition, this option is not available. See, this is option where I'm actually mousing over. That is where you'll identify the partition option. But let me just log into the advanced repository where we can see that partition option and understand how to create the multiple partitions. So if you go here, let's say, let me just log into this, and there are different types of partition or different types of algorithm to distribute the data in the multiple processes. So let me just log in. So if I edit this here and go to the same mapping tab here, under this mapping tab you have the partition tab, which it is here. So this is a general partition option which you have. See, basically you'll have the same mapping list in the this format. Basically, when you want to, by default, you'll have a partition something like this. I mean, by default, you'll have one partition, and you cannot reduce that partition. I mean, you cannot delete that. Basically, you cannot delete that. I mean, you cannot make what I'm trying to say. You cannot make the session as a zero partition. One partition is minimum. In the sense, one reader thread, one writer thread, and one transformation thread. So you can't delete or you can't reduce it to zero partitions because one is minimum thing. So whenever you want to add the partitions here, you have a different types of partition types where you can actually distribute it and then do it. So let me go here. See, basically it's about when you create a multiple partitions in the session level, there are a different algorithms. I call it as an algorithms or the different ways where you can actually distribute the data among the different partitions. So it's based on the different types you can do that. So the partitions are basically of different types. So one is like you have a pass-through partition, and another is you have a round robin partition, or let's say key range partition, and you have a database partitioning, and you have a round robin partition, round robin method, and you also have a hash user key partition and hash auto key partition. So these are all the different user key partition, and you have a hash auto key partition. So these are all the different algorithms which you have. It is just that when you enable the different types of partitions, it will distribute the data according to its own rules, everything whatever you're defining. So basically, let's talk about first is about the pass-through partition. I cannot show you the practically the performance how it is improved, but I can just show you how to enable or create the partitions here. So when you can go here, edit the partition point, here you can enable what type of partition you want. Let's say if you create a pass-through partition and I want to create, let's say, three partitions I want to create for this session, 1, 2, and then 3. You have three partitions. There will be a three partitions which will be created at the reader level, writer level, and then for this transformation thread as well. Now, if I actually go back to my transformation logic, you'll be seeing three transformations, three SQL queries, what it does. Basically, what happens is that instead of firing one SQL statement to the database, when you create the three partitions, it will fire a three different SQL statements to the database. So SQL1, partition1, partition2, and partition3. Here you can enable or you can filter the data according to that. Let's say I have data according to the year. 2001 data will be processed by partition1. Partition 2 will process the 2002 data, 2003 data, something like this. I can create my own filters and fire these queries to the database. So pass-through partition will create the three different threads on the reader level, and it will fire different SQL statements to the database to read it. See, practically speaking, is it advantageous to read the data from database using one query or multiple queries? Obviously, multiple queries. So we are writing mutually exclusive queries here. None of the two queries will return you the same data. So suppose, let's say, if I have 100 million records which I have to read, based on these three queries, one query will read 30 million, another query will read 30 million, another query will read 40 million. So that way I can distribute the data. So if all the queries are returning the same data or reading the same data, you'll end up in processing 300 million records, not the 100 million records, whatever it is, if you talk about the same example what we are talking. So that is the reason, basically whenever you enable the pass-through partition, you need to enable the mutually exclusive filters. A mutually exclusive filters should be defined for all these different partitions what we have. So pass-through partition is something that which you can enable and define the filter conditions here in the SQL queries. So there is a other type of partition. Let's say instead of a pass through, you want to go for a key range partition. So when you enable a key range partition, based on the date open column, you can actually, let's say any column you can choose, and according to that, you can divide the data. Basically now I can define the start range and end range for this, and according to that it will divide the data into three different partitions and process the data. So that is how, let's say if I want to define 2000 year data, so I can do this, and similarly, and let's say this one 1231 2000 0. So likewise you can define your own date range, whatever it is there, MMDDYYY HH24. Okay. Nonsense. 1 second. Why for one it is accepting, it is not. Okay. So what I'm trying to say, when you're creating a range partition, so basically what you need to do is you can actually create the different based on any field, you can define a start range value and the end range value. According to this start range and end range, this will divide the data into multiple different partitions and then do that. So this is about the key range partition what you see. And if you talk about the database partitioning, basically what a database partitioning does is it will go and query your database. It will go and query your database, and understand that how many partitions are there in the database. According to that partitions, it will read the data and process it. So if you create the three partitions according to your database partitioning, it will go and read your database partitioning, and according to that it will distribute the data. So likewise, you can enable the different types of partitions. See, in a simple words, it is just to improve your performance. Other than that, nothing else. There is no functional logic inside this. It is just to enable the parallel processing for your data load and then improve the performance. So these are the partitions that you can enable on the source side. In the target side, you can also change the partition type. So you can also make use of the round robin method. See, you're not sure about how to distribute the data in the target level, and you can always you can always edit and choose the different partition. So based on this algorithm, round robin algorithm, it will distribute the data at the target level. So when you're not sure about how to distribute the data evenly among the different partitions, you can go for a round robin method. And whenever you want to add a partitions on the aggregator level, let's say in this mapping, your aggregator transformation is taking almost 3 hours of time to aggregate the data whatever we are processing. And so 3 hours which it is taking for an aggregator transformation is a huge time. So I want to basically divide this aggregator transformation into three different partition and process it. So only the aggregator transformation you can do that. So you can also enable the partition point within the Informatica to do that. So here if I add a partition point and if I am selecting as hash auto keys, based on the group by columns, it will divide the data into three different partitions and then process. So what I'm trying to say, you can not only enable the partitions at the source level and the target level to do that, you can also break one single individual transformation into multiple processes and then complete the task, whatever it is. So basically, these are all the partitions, whatever we talk about: hash auto key, hash user key, pass through partition. These are all the things which helps you to distribute the data among evenly among the all the partitions. That's only the reason. That's only the reason why we go for a different types of partitions. You should actually understand which partition will help you to distribute the data uniformly across the different partitions. Based on that, you can choose it. If it is a pass through, you need to define your own filter condition. If it is a key range, you need to define the start range and end range values for that, and according to that it will distribute the data. And if it is a database partitioning, it will take care of. Your Informatica will read the database partitions and then process the data. Round robin means it's like if you have three partitions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that, it will uniformly distribute the data in use it. And hash user key partition is actually useful for an aggregator transformation and sorter transformation whenever you have. And hash auto key partition is suitable for an aggregator transformation and all. Hash user key and all, when you're if you want to divide the data based on the hash function using an any column, you can choose that. So that is more or less about the different partitions. See, practically, if you have to see them how they are working, you should have some millions of data and then try to enable the different partition and see whether it will reduce the amount of time or not. So to understand more examples like how it looks in the monitor level and everything, I gave you the screenshots in the Informatica Labs PDF to understand like how partitioning option works in Informatica 9. So if you try to go, it's basically you have the multiple reader threads, transformation thread and everything. And if you go and see in the monitor level, um, it looks something like this. See, they have created three partitions on the order thing. So partition 1 has not processed any records here. Partition 2 has processed this many records. Partition 3, this one. And if you see order SCD3, it doesn't have anything at all. You don't have anything. And it has only these partition details, what you have. So basically, this is more about the partition details, how it looks in the monitor level. It will divide the data according to the each partition, and it will show the statistics according to the each partition what it is there. If you go to the source target statistics in the monitor level, so at this level, at the session level, you'll not be able to identify like how much time it has taken. I mean, you'll be able to determine how much time it has taken, but you'll not be able to understand how the partitions have how the partitions are actually enabled on that, and then see that. So this is just for your reference how the general partitioning option works. So you can refer it here to understand theoretically what it is there. Practically, we'll not be able to see that because we don't have such a huge data to replicate and understand on the partitioning option. All right. Any questions here before we go with other things? All right. So the next one that we are going to understand is about next one is about the processing of the data using the pushdown optimization. So what is a pushdown optimization? Okay, so we know that basically whenever we execute a session, Informatica will read the data from your source, and it will transform the data within the Informatica server memory, and then it will load the data into the target table. So when you talk about the pushdown optimization, basically it will transform it will convert the mapping logic into an SQL, and then that SQL will be executed in the source database or the target database. So pushdown optimization can be enabled at the source level or at the target level, or full pushdown optimization, full pushdown. So when you go to the workflow manager, so even pushdown optimization is a licensed version. You see that option here, pushdown optimization. So let me take a simple example. So what I'm trying to say here is, if you go to this January 1, and let me just take the simple example. Basically, the transformation logic will happen within the Informatica server. So I don't want to perform the transformation logic within the Informatica server. Rather, I want to push the transformation logic into the source database or the target database what you have. So when you try to edit this, you go to the pushdown optimization mapping tab and then enable. This is your pushdown optimization tab. Basically, if you enable the pushdown optimization option to the source, see what it is doing is it is actually converting this mapping transformation logic which you have on the source qualifier and the expression transformation logic. It has converted into an SQL, and this query will be executed in your source database. And the transformation logic, it won't perform because it's already pushing this logic. It will just bring that data and then load it into the target table. That's it. It won't perform the transformation logic within here. Let's say if you want to push the transformation logic to the target, so it is pushing the logic. If you see the insert statement, and it is using the cast function to convert into a character data type and then doing it. So this is about the pushdown optimization option. Basically, it will convert the transformation logic into an SQL, and that SQL will be executed against the source database or the target database. Now you're not sure where you want to push the logic, whether I want to go to the source or a target, you're not sure. Then you can select the full pushdown optimization. Then Informatica integration service will decide whether it has to be pushed to the source or it has to be pushed to the target level. So it will decide. So if you select pushdown optimization is of three types. If you select the source, a transformed SQL query will be executed on the source database. If you select the target, transformed SQL query will be executed in the target. And if you select the full pushdown optimization, it will decide whether it has to push the logic to the source or whether it has to push the logic to the target. It could also be the case that some of the transformation logic it will push to the source and some of the transformation logic it will push to the target. That's how it will define the pushdown optimization. um, Basically that's how it will work in this case. So pushdown optimization is having a lot of limitations. Okay, so basically what happens is that, and if you have any workflow fact sales initial, okay, let's go to this and then I'll show you what are the limitations that it has. Maybe ODS sales, I think we can check. See, pushdown optimization doesn't work if your mapping contains the parameters or variables, whatever it has, it doesn't take it. So this parameter, I mean this mapping is having a variables and mapping parameters. I'll check out this and show you how the pushdown optimization will throw the warning to you. Okay, let me just edit it, go to the mapping tab and enable the pushdown optimization. See, um, no pushdown optimization is set because data connection variable need to be set. Okay, let me just, so there are limitations with um, there are a limitation with the pushdown optimization. If you are using XML transformation, you cannot push that to the database. If you are using the logic like a normalizer transformation, you cannot push that to the database. So basically there are limitations which are exist for a pushdown optimization. Since because it has more limitations, we don't uh, use much in the real time. So you can even view the pushdown optimization window from here as well just by clicking on that. So basically pushdown optimization is not much used in the real time to do that. Basically instead of if you are pushing the logic to the source database, your source OLTP database will get overloaded, and if you are pushing to the target, yeah, it's always advisable to push it to the target. Basically the pushdown optimization is available for all the databases. Yes, so it is available for Oracle first and they have enabled, then they have in the latest version they have enabled for Teradata system, and then they also enabled for a DB2 as well. So it works. I'm not sure about the SQL server whether the pushdown optimization works for it. These are the supported databases for it, and maybe the other databases may not work. Advanced workflow guide and pushdown optimization overview. Working with these databases. Okay, it works with DB2, SQL Server, Netezza, Oracle, Sybase, Teradata. So databases that use ODBC drivers also it will work. So these are the, you can configure a pushdown optimization only for these databases and it will not work with the other things. So basically if you are working error handling, recovery and all, if you are having the sessions which has error handling, which has the logging mechanism and which has a recovery, you cannot use the pushdown optimization. So pushdown optimization compatibility is for a joiner, union, lookup, target for all these databases. Incompatible with some other databases. So it has a lot of limitations. So basically we don't prefer much in the real time using the pushdown optimization unless your database engines are very powerful like Oracle Exadata and Teradata systems. So it's better to always perform within the Informatica server itself rather than pushing the logic to the database level. All right, so that completes details on the pushdown optimization what you have. All right, so that's it I have according to the syllabus that we have completed. And only the thing which we are left now is about the interview preparation, how you have to go about it, all these things. I'll explain you now. Okay, any questions before we go on to this? All right. See, I think we have not received any of your resumes regarding the how you need to explain about your project and everything. Anyway, I'll just go and give you the inputs about how you have to proceed when you're talking with a, I mean, when you're talking an interview and how you have to explain in the Informatica Power Center project. See, basically the interview preparation when you're preparing yourself, you need to concentrate on the different skills. Okay, so what and all are the things that they expect you to do is they will ask you the questions on SQL, and they will also ask you on the basic PLSQL part how you actually write. I think we already discussed this. And they will also ask you about the concepts on the data warehousing, and they will ask you the questions on the data modeling like star schema, snowflake schema, and the definitions of the different dimensions and everything. Then they will go to the Informatica Power Center, like they'll test you very deep on the Informatica Power Center part. And the next one is about the Unix shell scripting. So these are all the things which you have to prepare yourself for an Informatica Power Center developer. So when you go in as a 6-year-old developer and all, so you should be able to understand all these things related to this so that you'll be able to answer them in a proper way. So all these skills, if you're good, then it will be easier for you to um, clear the interviews. So even when you're preparing also, make sure that you're following this skills for preparing. Anyway, we will forward you the interview questions, whatever it is there. Okay, we will post the interview questions on your emails. Main thing about is the how you are explaining about your resume when you're talking about the project. See, basically they'll ask you about, can you introduce about yourself? So so when you're talking about it, so you should explain in a way that, okay, I'm so and so and have an experience in Informatica Power Center over 6 years, and I'm comfortable with these databases. Like you need to explain them which databases that you have worked. So in your resume, you have actually kept an Oracle database and then the Teradata, let's say SQL Server and all. So you can say that I worked with Oracle, Teradata, and SQL Server databases, whatever it is there. But in this training, we concentrated only on the Oracle part. So you can also explain that how, I mean, if your project is talking about an SQL Server database, there is no much difference if you use SQL Server and all. You can just explain that how it is there. So I worked with these databases, and which version of Informatica now currently you're using. So they'll ask you what version of database you're using. Mainly the version questions, obviously that will come. So you can explain, since we are learned with Informatica Power Center 951. So just explain about Informatica Power Center 951, and now after we started the training, the latest version is also being into the market and people started using it. That is your 961 is the latest version. So when you talk about the database versions, so you should be able to explain them. So let's say Oracle is 11G and SQL Server is 2008, all these things which you can explain. And once you explain about the technology, so you can also explain like Informatica server or Informatica server is installed in the Linux, and it is there in the Linux database. And what BI tool it is being used? ETL tool, that's fine. So what are the BI tool that is used in your project? So they'll ask you. So you should be able to tell them this is what the BI tool is being used. But if you are comfortable, you can say that, okay, I'm comfortable with it to a little extent, or you can say that I'm not comfortable with it. There is a separate team which is actually handling about it. Let's say you can talk about, let's say, OBIE or a business objects, or let's say any other tool like a Cognos or a Tableau, anything that you can explain on this on the BI tools part. So when you explain about the architecture of the project, first you can explain yourself like what are the databases that are involved and which ETL tool is being used, and obviously the Informatica Power Center, and what are the BI tool that is being used in this. So when you explain about the project, basically that they understand, I mean they would like to understand from you is that what is the project is implemented, what is the purpose of implementing that project, and how it is helping to the business users. That is what you have to concentrate more on. Then you need to explain about your roles and responsibilities. Let's say when you talk about the project, don't say that as uh, details about the project as description and all. So you can explain in such a way that, let's say, you have a project where you have a legacy systems and you're replacing that legacy system reporting with a warehouse. Or you can just explain, let's say we have an Oracle ERP system as a source system. Okay. um, Oracle EBS or source system is our Oracle EBS. I'm just giving you an example. So according to your resume, you can convert this. So Oracle EBS is our source system, and we have implemented a data warehouse. Um, Data warehouse for a, I mean, we have implemented a data warehouse in Oracle for all the subject areas. Let's say when you talk about all the subject areas, it's like order management analytics, or let's say sales analytics and HR analytics, like that. So you can just explain what analysis is being done on your project end. So basically what I'm trying to say here is, like, we have integrated the data from Oracle EBS system, and we have created a data for the different subject areas like a sales and finance and order management. And OBIE is being used as a reporting tool. Generally the business user will generate the reports and understand how much the sales that they have made, and what are the financial risks that they have, or what are the different what is the growth of the business. All these things they actually generate from the data warehouse. So that's how you have to explain, maybe in a 2 or 3 lines. Then you need to go about coming to my roles and responsibilities. So your responsibilities you have to explain. So basically the purpose of the project is very important. How your business users are using and how they are generating a reports is very important, and then explain that. So based on your project, you can actually prepare those 2 or 3 lines and how you have to explain about the project purpose. So then coming to my roles and responsibilities, so what you have to explain is that, okay, so you can say that as I have involved in the end-to-end development. I have involved in implementing the uh, end-to-end ETL lifecycle. So what is an end-to-end ETL project lifecycle? So we already understand in our training like how ETL project lifecycle starts and how you have to do that. I have involved in end-to-end project lifecycle, and in terms of understanding the requirements from the customer, understanding the requirements from the customer. So customer is nothing but your business user, whoever is actually gives you the requirements, and translating the requirements into design, translating the requirements into design requirements into design. So when you say that design, so tell them that I've involved in the high level design as well as a low level design. What it is there, prepare the, you can, third one, you can actually say that as prepare the design documents. So you need to also familiar with the documentation, how it has to be done. Prepare the documents like LLD, HLD and all. So I already shown you, like, I mean, project lifecycle when we discussed what is LLD will contain, what HLD will contain, and all those things. And you can also say that involved in designing the data model, involved in designing the dimensional model, like star schema and the snowflake schema, star schema and the star schema and snowflake schema. So when you actually say this word, you should be able to understand what is advantage of star schema and what is advantage of the snowflake schema. So then the fifth one, once you design the data model, you can say that created a source to target column mapping sheet. That is nothing but the data source to target column mapping sheet as part of a design. And the sixth one is like prepare the database scripts for creating the tables in the warehouse and the staging area. Prepare the DDL scripts for creating the tables in warehouse, staging database, all these things which you need to do. And the seventh one is next. This is where your implementation comes into picture, or created a mappings sessions, workflows, and all these things as per the requirements. And you can also say that eighth one is about unit testing of the flows, or unit testing of all the ETL components, and submitting the test results, all these things, unit testing of all the ETL components and submitting the results, what it is there, so that you can explain. And this is what unit testing of all the ETL components and everything. And you can also say that involved in prepared the migration document template for the migration, prepared the migration template, and coordinated with the testing team for fixing the defects, or so these are all like coordinated with the ETL testing team for fixing the defects and everything, uh, fixing the defects. So this is also is one of the the thing that you do. And also uh, perform the sanity check after the migration. So all these things you can perform the sanity check after the migration, after the QA migration. So all these things are like your responsibilities as a developer when you do that. So if you're actually applying for a lead position or a lead a lead position, you can even say that I have managed a team of 5 and I used to distribute the work to them. And let's say I've used to involve in the peer review. It's like whenever your fellow developer complete the code, and you will review it and then give the inputs to them to modify this, and what are the disadvantages of that implementation, how better you can actually implement these kind of things, will actually involve in the code review. So you can even say that if you are going as a senior developer, code review and all. So this is how you have to explain in a way that maybe 10 to 12 points probably you can explain that how it will be used. And if they ask you about your reporting requirements, I mean, let's say they ask you on the whether do you have exposure to the reporting tools or the BI tools. So if you are good with the BI tools, you can say that okay, I'm not an expert in so and so, but I'm a beginner, I'm just learning that and this and all. You can just explain in that way. So this is how you can explain your project roles and responsibilities. So basically what details that you are capturing, and they might ask you which data modeling tool that you have used. Data modeling tool, you can, as I said, I think I might have discussed in the training, data modeling tool, either you can download Erwin from the Google, Computer Associate site or Oracle Designer. Just see through the screens and say that okay, this is a designer tool or an Erwin which I have used, and Erwin or an Oracle designer tool which I have used to implement this one. So this is more on the project responsibilities and everything. So then once you explain about your project, what is the purpose, what technology which is used, what versions and everything, so by that time you have completed your 5 minutes of your time. So then they'll ask you with the questions. So basically, most commonly asked questions in the Informatica Power Center is about what is the complex mapping that you have actually implemented in the project. So Informatica Power Center, uh, let's say when you talk about this, they'll ask you about the complex mapping. See, mainly the when you are explaining about a complex mapping, they'll just understand your way that how you're explaining about the requirement. Okay, so obviously the complex mapping is something that which cannot be explained, or your maybe a interviewer who is actually doing an interview cannot understand even if you say the complex logic whatever it is there. So we have a video which is actually posted on our channel about the complex mapping. So just don't say the same thing, but you can just understand what how you can actually explain it. So for us, it is not possible for us to give you the individual complex mapping what you have actually implemented. So for this complex mapping, we already have the video, and you can subscribe to our channel. We'll keep posting you about the different videos which you have on the which you see, or what how you have to prepare and everything. So the complex mapping part, I'm just leaving it to you to understand. Basically, if I try to explain, it might cause. I mean, we may not be. I may not be able to give you the 100% understanding on the complex mapping part. So try to go through that and then see. In case if you still want any kind of a documentation or something, probably we'll just come up with some documentation which will help you and then do it. So that is a common question which they ask. So it's just that you need to explain the scenario where you felt it as a complex, and how did you actually implement that in your case. So that you need to explain. So when you're explaining, they might come back and say that what is complex in it, it is just a normal mapping. So don't just say as SED type 1 is complex or SED type 2 is complex. SED type 1 and type 2 are very common mappings that we actually develop, common mappings which we develop. So think about a scenario what we have actually explained, and based on that you try to explain them in a complexity manner whatever it is. And that is about the complex mapping. So second thing is about the performance tuning. Okay, so they will just ask you, just to understand more about it, how do you actually tune a mapping? If I give you a task, let's say a workflow is taking this much amount of time, what are your steps to tune it? Definitely in the interview they'll not give you the practical scenario to just to understand from you saying that okay just go and tune it, right? So you just need to explain the process what it is there. So when you talk about a performance tuning, we did talk about it, how to collect the statistics, and from there you have to start and explain all the details about the performance tuning. So performance tuning is one common question which you get. How do you tune the mapping? How do you tune the joiner? How do you tune the lookup? All these things which will be there. For each and every transformation, you need to understand one trick and then tell them, okay, lookup, this is how we can actually improve the performance. For a joiner, this is how you can do it. So all these things, whatever we talked about the performance tuning, you can explain in detail on the performance tuning part. So basically when you start, just start from the first, you need to understand the bottleneck. Once you understand the bottleneck, then only you can do that. So as I said, this is like a trial and error method only. So you nothing is granted in case of tuning the performance or whatever. So first, how to find the bottleneck, explain them, and when you find the bottleneck, how to eliminate the bottleneck, that's what you have to explain them in the performance tuning. So these two questions are quite common, and then we do it. So then they will ask you like any ETL framework that you have developed which is can be reused across the reusable ETL framework, what ETL framework that you have developed for doing this and all. So you can just explain for this reusable ETL framework. If you remember, we have actually done sequence generator population. So we have actually created one reusable transformation reusable transformation for generating the surrogate primary key, right? Reusable transformation that you can explain saying that instead of populating the surrogate primary key using the sequence generator, we have actually created this reusable transformation for populating the primary key, which can be used in the which can be used for every table. This is what we have developed. So this is an effective framework than your sequence generator transformation or something. That way you can explain about the reusable framework. So they'll ask you like, have you done any kind of an automation or this that and all. You can just say that any kind of an automation which you have done to avoid the manual work, this and all they'll ask. So you can say that uh, for migration process we have created a shell script utility which will export the code from development environment and create an XML files. So basically, we have created a shell script using a PM rep, which will create an XML file, which will export the XML file from the dev box, which will export the XML files from development environment, so that you can explain. I mean, just in a prompt, that's a way that you actually automate. So the basic questions about what is a transformation, what is a transformation property, all these things are quite common questions what you get. But when you have to explain about the complex mapping, performance tuning, automation, anything that you have done to reduce the support activities, all these things, you can say that as this one. Or automation, you can also say that one is that email task we have implemented for a session failure, workflow failure, and session success. I mean, workflow success. All these things you can also tell that as an automation task. In all the workflows, we have created an email task for a session failure and the workflow failure, so that it will notify our support team for this on the automation part, which it is there. So this is how you can explain the details about the Informatica Power Center part. And they'll ask you the questions maybe in terms of what is difference between a static lookup and dynamic lookup, persistent cache, and they might ask you how do you skip the header and footer in a flat file, or how do you populate the number of records in the flat file, or what this simple kind of a questions which they ask. For that you'll get the lot of answers in the internet itself and then do it. So mainly after this they'll ask you about the scenarios. Okay, so they'll just give you some scenario and then they'll ask you to expect you to answer that based on that. Let's say they ask you about the finding the cumulative salary. We have seen that is one scenario, or dividing the data into three targets: first record into first target, second record into second target, a third record into third target. These kind of scenarios which you get. So basically the answering the scenarios is that how better you're understanding the question, and then translating that question into a transformation. That is main important. That's it. See, when they give you the scenario, try to ask them more questions to understand the question better. Okay, so once you understand the question, think about it, which transformation will help me for to do that, and based on that you just explain them the flow. Nobody will ask you to implement. You just have to give the skeleton diagram saying that okay, using expression, using aggregator, I'll achieve this, so that you can implement it. So to practice all those scenarios, you can still continue that scenario things. We already gave you one document which is containing almost more than 50 to 60 scenarios which is there, and you can practice all of them, or you can just go through them what it is being happening. So if you practice all these scenarios this way, you will be good to answer the questions what you get in the interviews basically. So all these scenarios I would request you to go through each one of them, and then so that your interview process will become very simple, and then you can easily crack that. So apart from this, you have to practice all these examples as well, whatever the examples that we have listed over here in the Informatica scenarios document. All right, so see, basically the employee table contains a salary and commission in the USD in the target. Commission and salary will be converted to a given prefix given prefix. So how do you get that? So basically, source you have a dollars and you need to actually make it as a rupees. So how do you get that? And that is what you have to define and understand using this. Okay, so it's basically about how you're understanding the question and how you're implementing. That's it. So the scenario question is also common, to understand. I mean, that they will expect you to answer when they give you the requirement, how you are achieving that. That is the common question that you get in the power center scenario question. So, and the basic questions, I'm not talking about it. So basic questions, for each and every transformation you understand, and what are the questions that you have, and what is the example that you have implemented, and go about it. So this is more on the power center part, how you prepare it. And the data warehousing concept, data modeling, these are all the theoretical things. Anyway, whatever we have discussed, you can just go through that. That is more than enough, and then answer them. So they'll ask you like, what is an SCD type 2, this, that, and all. They will ask you in this. And when it comes to the Unix shell scripting, so basically they'll ask you what is this command for, what kind of shell scripts that you have written in the um, in your project and all those things. So you can just give some examples like, I've created a shell script to created a script to archive the files. And so something or the other. I mean, like, let's say I've created a script to delete the files which are older than delete files which are older than 30 days, something like this. So this way you can actually explain, and created a shell script to create a list file, uh, to create a list file. So all these simple things you can explain. They'll ask you like, what is the simple commands, like what do you mean by echo dollar question mark, and what is a command to find out the, maybe replace the file or replace the word in a file. All these kind of things, like I want to display the top 5 lines, bottom 5 lines, what is the command? So these are all the basic commands which you get, and you need to also answer them. So they won't go in deep in the Unix shell scripting. It's more about, they'll ask you very basics only. But Informatica developer, if you're just like a beginner or more than a beginner, that is enough for you to crack the interviews in the Unix shell scripting. And when it comes to the SQL and the PLSQL, it's basically, they will ask you more on how to eliminate the duplicates, or what is a minus query does, or basically simple questions like how to find out the top 3 salaries, bottom 3 salaries, how do you eliminate the duplicate records using a query, all these things which you'll understand. And the PLSQL, they might ask you in terms of difference between a procedure and function, and what is a package, what is the advantage of package over a procedure. All these kind of questions they'll ask you, and these details, they'll go in detail and understand you. So these things, once you understand the SQL basic PLSQL questions, that will be able to understand. See, your primary skill is more on Informatica. You should be very strong in Informatica. Along with this, you have to prepare yourself onto these details as well. In a way, you'll be able to present yourself in the interviews. So that is pretty much which we have for this batch. I mean, for in terms of interviews, and should always generate the numbers from 1 every time you do that. Okay.
Yeah.
So for that, you need to always select the option reset, so that it will always
Okay.
generate the numbers from 1. Okay. This is
Okay.
fine. And now what I'm saying is, you have to use this aggregator transformation here, and you have an employee table wherein you need to, where is the source, which one is the source here?
In source files, EMP.
Okay, this
Yeah.
is this. So just drag and drop, and you need to take the 2 instances of source and connect these 2 things. And the next value, you don't require it. I just want to find out the total count, and you can use anything. I mean, you can just use a count of employee number or anything. It is just to find for me the total number of count. That's it. I don't need anything else from this. Okay.
Okay.
And now you have this data. Basically, you need to add a dummy column here. So to join this data and add one dummy column. Just I call it as dummy column. So which it's going to be an integer, and I'll define this as a 1, and I am initializing it to 1. Okay.
Okay.
And here also I need one more expression transformation, and which I call it as expression underscore aggregator, and pull this count information whatever it is there, and which is your total count. And at the same time I also need an aggregator dummy column, so aggregator column. So this is also an integer, and I'm going to define this as a 1 again. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to join. Yeah.
Okay.
So I have two flows. I need only these columns. I don't need all the other columns from the your this one also aggregator. I need only these data, and I'm going to join this information. So basically using the joiner joiner underscore whatever emp. Now you should have the data, let's say total count, which you have an aggregated column, and you need to have the next value and this also as this one. So next value, this is like a, you can call this as a sequence value, and now this is what it is. So the join condition is going to be, you're going to join both of them because dummy column is initialized to 1 and the aggregate column is initialized to 1, so you'll get the match and then get it. Anyway, that's going to be the normal join. Here you need to define the router transformation. So basically the total count should go to this, and the next value should go to this, and you have an employee number, employee name, and job should go to this. So save this now. And here the conditions what you have written is next value is less than or equal to this and then greater than. Okay, that's fine. So how many records you have in the employee table? So let's
22.
22 records, right? So it should be 11 and 11 and this.
Yeah.
Let me log into workflow manager. Okay, what is the mapping which is loading the data into this?
W underscore divide underscore emp.
Okay.
Yes.
Now let me validate it. So what are the file names that you have given? Let's check that. It's a file or a relational table, is it?
It's a,
Yeah, it's a
I think
relational.
it's a table. Yeah, it's a relation.
Okay, I've selected a truncate option. Let's see. And let me select it because if it is already there, it will truncate and load.
Okay.
Now let me run that and go here. Need to have a preview data. This, what is your username?
Parvati. Yes.
So now you have 11 records here, I think, or how many? More than 11?
Yeah. I think
Okay, what about the other one? Employee 2. I think you have used the same employee definition. No, it doesn't work. So I think, yeah. See, what has happened is you have used the same target, right? So that's why it is loading all the 22 records into that. You should have a different target.
But why it's loading into only one file? So if it is,
it is not a file that you are loading. You are loading into a table. It's not a file.
Okay.
It is a relational writer.
So
This,
logic and everything is same, but I done a mistake at target, right? So
yeah,
because I just
you
pulled the
just
same
need to,
target
you
and
just
same.
need to, okay, let's do one thing. Okay, let me just convert employee 1 and employee 2 as a flat files instead of targets. Okay,
Okay.
employee 1 and employee 2, you don't have that. Okay, that's fine. Let me create that.
I just pulled targets from source only itself. That's all.
Okay, I'm just changing this as a flat file. Okay,
Okay.
and now it is a flat file here. So
Okay.
anyway, these two are the flat files. So if I refresh the mapping, so let me go to this, and still it is relational, right? I'm not sure. It's changing. Okay, it's taken as a flat file. I have not saved it. Okay, it's loading everything into this. I don't know why is that so. Okay, let's run the debugger. We'll see that what is happening. Maybe this, I'm not sure what, from where it is starting the sequence. Oh, current value is 287 now. So the value is already being incremented. I think that's the reason it's on.
Okay.
Now it is working. Check, these are 11
Yeah.
records.
Yes.
And these are the 11 records what you have. Alright.
Okay. Thank you so much, Karthik.
Yeah, alright, thanks.
Thanks.